first up, we're going to have Aaron Jacobson. He's a founder and designer of a zero-waste clothing brand, Faan. His work centers on community collaboration and resource sharing as fundamental principles of circular design. Aaron practiced architecture in China before launching Faan in Cleveland, once home to the largest garment manufacturing center in the United States. Faan is a slow fashion brand creating workwear-inspired unisex pieces from organic and salvaged fabrics since 2015. Each piece is cut and sewn by a small team in Cleveland, Ohio. Faan's domestic supply chain, organic sourcing, and natural dye program underpin the brand's mission to establish a circular model for apparel production within the Rustfelt fiber shed.
Kat took some of my best material, but I'll try to follow up on that. Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for being here and for having me. My name is Aaron Jacobson, and I started my zero-waste, organic, slow fashion brand, Faan, in 2015. Though in 2015, I would have described our work very differently. So for the purposes of this talk, I'd like to start back then and trace the evolution of my work and our values through some distinct phases. Our visuals are a little backloaded, so I hope you can tolerate just listening to the sound of my voice for a while. In the meantime, you can enjoy this picture from a recent photo shoot of ours, which features, you may recognize Mia, who spoke last hour, and this is Esther, and they're wearing some pieces that we recently finished and that showcase different tracks of the work that we do. Esther is wearing some vintage salvaged linen that we found in a market in New York. And Mia is wearing a kind of blush pink that was dyed by hand with avocado pits by Kent's own Jasmine Cornell, who is also in this audience. I won't point her out. So I was asked to speak a bit about kind of my brand journey. So I'd like to start in 2013 in China, where I was living and working as an architect. So I moved to Beijing after my graduate work, and I found myself only by coincidence living in the garment district and walking the narrow alleyways of the fabric markets on my way to and from work. At that time, I had no interest in clothing at all, no understanding of the global mechanics of the industry, certainly no awareness of the systemic, ethical, and environmental failures that it lives by. But as a designer, I was absolutely seduced by the fabric markets and by what I saw as a new design challenge, working with textiles rather than wood or steel. And I started sketching ideas for garments in the same notebooks that I was sketching architectural details for my clients. Before long, I was sharing those drawings with a woman that I met in the market. Her name is Faan, and she's the namesake of our brand. I talked through drawings with her in the mornings on my walking commute to work. We'd pick some fabric off of her wall, and I'd head off to work. Sometimes the very same day on my way home, I'd pick up a finished garment sample. If not that night, maybe the next night. I was thrilled by the immediacy of this design process. I was used to designing buildings over the course of months and months and months, only to watch those projects often get shelved altogether or compromised by political interests. And now I was turning ideas into tangible, wearable objects within 24 hours. And it was so cheap. I didn't understand then how problematic, how troublesome this process really was. I took for granted this is just, I guess, how clothing making works. What did I know? I never researched what garment workers in China were being paid or how many hours they were working to meet such quick deadlines. I talk to Fan all the time as a friend. We talked about our families, our lives. We still check in with each other every year around Lunar New Year to say hello. But I never asked her then about her own working conditions. And I suppose it never occurred to me too, because the arrangement that we had was designed to benefit me, the customer. So I know there are a lot of people in this room who understand these issues deeply and can teach me a lot more than I can teach you, I'm sure. But the average consumer and my average customer doesn't. And for someone who started making clothing because it seemed like a fun new design challenge, I now spend as much time educating and marketing about the ills of fast fashion as I do actually designing anything at all. So the way that I operated in China a decade ago reflects some of the same uninformed fast fashion shopping habits that are so pervasive still. And we all can use a reminder, myself included, that when we find a great deal shopping online or a price that seems too good to be true, there are likely people throughout that product supply chain around the world, people you will never meet, farmers, dyers, sewers like Fan, who are paying the difference with their well-being and their dignity. Back to 2014. I returned from China with a suitcase full of garment samples, having quit my job, and a new plan to try manufacturing a collection of clothing in Cleveland, once home to the second largest garment manufacturing center in the country, where my own great-grandfather had worked as a pattern grader. This was not easy. I struggled then to find people with the skills, the equipment, the interest in production sewing. And I heard over and over again that I should really consider outsourcing production to someplace like China. It would be cheaper. Finally, I did find a small batch production facility in Cleveland run by a Kent State fashion graduate, Amanda Kausert, and she shared my stubborn optimism about the opportunity in bringing manufacturing back to Cleveland. They made our first collection in 2015, and we've kind of been growing up together, making every Fan piece ever since. I took that first collection to New York, the garment bag slung over my shoulder, visited boutiques and told anyone who was polite enough to listen to me that these pieces were proudly made in Cleveland. I went to fashion trade shows and told designers there that they too should really consider producing their collections in Cleveland. And the response that I got everywhere was the same. Why? Made in Cleveland, it might surprise some of you, is not a selling point. It was actually a real turnoff and a liability. I heard over and over again, mind you, this is 10 years ago, and I promise things have changed, but I heard over and over again 10 years ago, New York is the center of the fashion universe. You have to be here to be taken seriously. So I'll admit that some of those early conversations, they really shook me, but they did raise a really important question for me. Be taken seriously by whom? By New York's designer community, by its fashion magazines, its influencers. I work, as you now know, with some really incredible fashion interns in my studio, and I ask the same question of them. Who or what are you designing for? In architecture, we design buildings in response to the needs of a community. And I believe so deeply that a clothing company, a responsible clothing company, has to do the same. And for Faan, that community is here. There is a really incredible ecosystem of institutions and innovators in Cleveland and in Kent, of course, who genuinely want to share ideas, elevate each other's work. Many of them are speaking at this conference. Rust Belt Fiber Shed, Praxis Fiber Workshop, Esperanza Threads have all been enormously supportive and inspiring to our practice. So I dug in on Cleveland. But the status quo in the apparel industry runs very deep. And the question of where to produce turned out not to be as daunting or as challenging as the question of how to produce. So let's take the example of how a fast fashion t-shirt is produced by tracing its supply and production networks. This shirt will be made from conventional cotton, one of the most insecticide, pesticide, and water-intensive crops on the planet, poisoning land, waterways, and farmers along the way, and it accounts for 99% of all global cotton supply. This cotton will then be shipped, likely from country to country, to be spun, milled, bleached, dyed synthetically. An average t-shirt like this will travel more than 10,000 miles around the world by the time it reaches a clothing rack or your doorstep, for anyone keeping track of carbon expenditure. Many of these performance treatments and synthetic dyes, of course, they toxify land and waterways too, not to mention the textile workers who work long hours in countries that often don't have strong labor protections. After all of this damage is done, clothing companies will thoughtlessly send millions of tons of overproduced excess fabrics to landfills and incinerators every year. All told, this standard, accepted, linear production model that we all participate in makes the textile and garment industry, by some accounts, the most, well, second only to oil as the most polluting industry on the planet. So there's a lot to grapple with here, and we are still learning all the time how to do better ourselves. But what's become absolutely clear to me and to my small team is the solutions to these problems are almost always domestic, even better regional, and at best inherently local. We only source US grown, US milled organic cotton. We only work with cotton thread rather than industry standard polyester. We only source salvage, dead stock fabric remnants from secondhand markets. We don't use toxic dyes or plastic packaging. We only produce in small batches to limit overproduction. These decisions already put us in pretty rare company, frankly, but as consumers, we should all expect this and demand this of the brands, companies that we choose to support as the bare minimum standard for the apparel industry. What really makes our work special, I think, is in community. The time and energy that I used to put into designing much larger collections, I spend now meeting with local artists, other small business owners, neighborhood organizations. I want to know what they're working towards. I want to understand what they're struggling with. And many of them have given me the space to do the same. Are there ways that we can work together to ease logistical inefficiencies? Are there resources that we can be sharing so that we might not waste so much energy or material along the way? Emily and I just talked this week about how we might, you'll be meeting Emily next, I'm sorry, about how we might work together to, collaborate to repurpose our collective production waste. We try to design from this starting point, building on the goals and the resources that we already share locally, relying whenever possible on raw materials that we already have access to in our regional Rust Belt fiber shed, so that our work can grow harmoniously and efficiently from our community rather than imposing on it. Okay, I'd love to share a few examples of our work and our recent collaborations. So first, here we are cutting shirts in Cleveland and shipping those shirts to customers with the supply chain printed directly on our packaging. We've hosted community dye days with Rust Belt Fiber Shed, even a community avocado pit drive to dye small batches of our shirts with this pale pink. We help Praxis to harvest indigo on their property, and then, of course, to dye more of our pieces in their community indigo vat. And what do we do with the scraps from all of these shirts? We partnered with the Morgan Conservatory in Cleveland to pulp our scraps into paper, which we now use for branding material, like these thank you notes, which we handwrite and put into our orders. We've worked with Freight Not Farm to host a community compost demonstration using our organic cotton scraps. Recently, we met with Tansy Recycling in Akron. They collect post-consumer plastic waste, sort it, shred it, press it into secondary uses. And we now use some of their buttons on our new camp shirts. And here, finally, I am with some of our incredible Kent fashion interns, who, as you heard just before lunch, sourced alpaca from Ohio farms, and we're working now to prototype our first sweater in Kent State's knitting lab. So these local partnerships and collaborations give Faan meaning and purpose. There are tons of very talented designers and savvy marketers around the world, but whatever success we have had has come from community building, from connecting our customers more directly to each other, to a sense of place, and to the people and processes that make producing clothing in any place like Cleveland not only possible, but economically and environmentally imperative. Thank you all so much for listening.
All right, thank you so much. So we have another wonderful company in Cleveland also. So we have Emily Tiell. She is the executive director of Esperanza Threads. She has been involved with the organization for 10 years. Her background is working with the refugee population, and she has great aspirations to enhance and grow Esperanza Threads. Esperanza Threads is a small nonprofit located on the west side of Cleveland. I was a West Sider. They offer free sewing classes to those looking to gain a skill or want to get into Cleveland's industrial manufacturing field. Anyone is welcome to attend their classes, from the newly resettled refugees to longtime Clevelanders to people coming out of second chance and rehab homes or programs. A stipend program is available to low-income students also. So welcome.
Hello. Can everybody hear me well?
Yeah.
Great. So my name's Emily Tiell. I am the director of Esperanza Threads. I became the director about a year and a half ago. But as you heard, I've been involved with the organization for about a decade now, which is crazy. I am not originally from Cleveland. I'm from a super small town in Ohio called Tiffin. So if anybody knows, that's great. So one thing, I know part of this is going to be talking about like the sustainability of it all. And I'll get to that in a minute. But remembering that I'm from Tiffin, sustainability and like recycling, like that just started to happen like a couple of years ago. Like we had recycling bins. So things like this were never on my radar until I got to Esperanza Threads. So I'll talk a little bit about my history, and then I'll talk about Esperanza's history. I came to Cleveland as an intern with Catholic Charities, and I worked with the Migration and Refugee Services program. My job was to help my clients find jobs. So I kind of had two sets of clients. I had my refugee folks and my employers and HR and all of that. For the way things work, the very first person I took to a job was somebody that participated in Esperanza Threads' sewing training program. So my first job was somebody working in the industrial sewing manufacturing field at Cleveland Canvas Goods. And when I came back, I was so excited, and the job developer position had just opened up. And my boss was like, "So you're still in college, you're interning. What do you think?" I said, "Sure, this is great. I could do this." So like 3 days later, I was hired. And so from then on, anytime anybody in my office was talking about a sewing company, I wanted to be in charge of it. Because I formed this relationship with Sister Mary Eileen Boyle, who is our founder and creator of Esperanza Threads. And her and I just clicked. We understood each other, and she valued my opinion. So I ended up joining the board, and my role of that was to communicate the needs that the companies were asking for in terms of skills people needed to bring with them for their interview. And I helped grow that. When I originally started, our sewing training program was only 8 days, 2 hours a day. It really isn't enough, especially for our refugees who have never worked in the United States. You know, they're not used to an 8-hour workday, standing on your feet for 8 hours, or just some of that. So over the course of time, we've now structured our sewing training classes to be either 4 weeks or 8 weeks. And they go from 10:30 to 3:30, 4 days a week. So it's a very much more intense program. The benefits of our sewing training program, when I could see as a job developer, one of my single moms from Somalia had taken the program. I ended up getting her a job at an organization called Team Wendy that made military helmets. And so that in and of itself is pretty interesting, right? Here's a refugee making helmets for our military. And they were a very welcoming organization in hiring a lot of my folks, especially those that didn't speak English. It was very refreshing to see that. A few years later, her daughter came, and she ended up teaching her daughter how to sew. And then her daughter taught her older daughter how to sew. So I got to see the trajectory of how beneficial learning this very simple skill was to this family in particular. So that is kind of how I got involved with Esperanza Threads. Now, Esperanza Threads has been around for 22 years. Sister Mary Eileen started it as a way to combat sweatshops, is essentially what she started it for. And she had created a line of organic women's clothing, and she was partnering with the women's prison and teaching them how to sew, and they made a lot of the garments. That was in Bracknell, was when they were originally located there. Eventually, they left that area and moved to Cleveland in our Gordon Square neighborhood. And we've been in the current building that we are for the past like 15 years. So once we came here, we were still manufacturing, and we were doing the trainings in the basement, and they were those like 2-week classes, like I said. And we were manufacturing upstairs a line of organic cotton shirts, baby onesies, leggings, a few things like that. And the goal of that was to raise enough funds to support our sewing training program. In 2020 or 2019, we as a board sat down and really thought about what is our mission here? What have we become and seen that we needed to do? And we really wanted to focus on that sewing training aspect. So we decided to stop manufacturing. And as probably most people, 2020, like that's going to be our year. We're going to try some new stuff and rebrand. Well, yeah, that happened. So, and that's about the time sister had started talking to me about wanting me to come over and take over since she's going to be retiring at the end of this year. So we really wanted to focus on this sewing training and community building. So our sewing training, like I said, 4 or 8 week classes, but we do have a stipends program. Taking 4 or 8 weeks to learn something, you still have bills and food to pay for. So any of our low income students are able to get a $500 for 4 weeks or up to $1,000 stipend for the 8 week program. And we treat that like a job. If you're late, not showing up, it goes down. So that helps, especially those refugee folks that need to get in the habit of being somewhere on time and things like that. At the end of our 8 week class, we also provide everybody with a brand new home sewing machine because we want them to continue their journey. And since COVID, we've also seen a change in our demographic. Me as a job developer, I was sending my clients all the time. So our clients made up about 90% of those participating in our classes. Now that I'm not there supplying people, we wanted to branch out a little bit more. And through COVID, we've seen people just want to come and learn. People want to do something for themselves. People want to do something to help their mental health. And that's been a very big thing that we've seen in the past year and a half. We've also seen a few older people. We just had a class finish up last week, and Miss Edna is 83 years old, and she just completed our class. And she was so scared, so nervous, but she said she's always wanted to learn how to sew, and she just never had the opportunity. And so we were able to provide her with that opportunity. And she's so cute. She's coming in now all the time, helping, volunteering, cutting fabrics and things like that for our next round of students. We strive to be a very welcoming spot for people. As Kat said, refugees, people coming out of rehab shelters, second chance programs, people walking in off the street that want to learn a skill, you are welcome in our building. And that's how the world should be. And it's my favorite part of our job is looking out into the sewing room and seeing the diverse group of people we have, seeing our American folks with cars giving rides to our folks that don't, seeing people share their food and their culture. We had one person had a birthday party, and hearing all the different languages sing happy birthday or their version of it is truly beautiful. And that's why I'm heavily invested in growing Esperanza Threads. We are extremely small. Not a lot of people have heard of us. And if you are in the Cleveland area, if you hear Esperanza, you might automatically think of the Hispanic Seniors or the Hispanic Community Center, not too far from our offices. So it gets a little confusing. So my big push has been getting out and being more involved in the neighborhood. We started attending events at 78th Street Studios as a way to get our name out there and be a part of our community. This week is the Our Lady of Mount Carmel Festival, and we share a parking lot with the church. So we've been opening up every night this week during their festival just to get the word out. And it was Thursday night, we had about 30 people come in, which is a huge number for us. So that was fantastic. The other half of what we're doing, not just teaching, and something else that came out of COVID, were people had nothing but time to clean their houses. And that led to a bunch of fabric that nobody knew what to do with. And we said we'd take it because we need it for our class. That expanded And now our basement looks like a Joann fabric store. So going back to, I said I'm from Tiffin, recycling, sustainability, just not really ever something I was concerned about, very ignorant to the whole thing. Me seeing our basement has greatly opened my eyes to know that all of that would have ended up in a landfill. It hurts my soul a little bit. So what we do with that fabric, whatever we don't need for class or projects that we're working on, it's open to the public to come in and purchase. We sell it for $1 a yard. And notions and patterns, 10 cents a piece. We don't want the cost of something to be a reason somebody doesn't learn a skill. It should be easy for people to have access to this. And I've heard like Joann's stuff is maybe like $7, $12 a yard. Some people can't afford that, especially if they're learning. We have a whole back section of just totes full of yarn. So anybody, if you're in this area, please come down and shop our shelves. In the past 3 months, we have gotten over $700 worth of people buying the fabric. So it's amazing to see that. It has not put a dent in the supply that we have, though. But now that word has gotten out that we'll take this fabric, there have been a few local manufacturers that have started to give us their dead stock. One company was starting to close down. It was an awning canvas company. And now I have awning material. I have material for signs and flags. I have probably 10 giant rolls of blue sweatshirt material. So again, if anybody is looking for material, please come see me after this. We'd love to show you our space. So those are like our main things. We offer our sewing training classes and we have this fabric. We're going to be starting evening classes too, because people still want to learn that have a regular job and can't participate in our daytime classes. So we're going to be offering in September a sewing 101. And we're also going to be offering a crochet and knitting class, both at beginner level and advanced. And we're figuring out the details to do an upholstery class because we've been donated so much upholstery fabric that we need to figure out something to do with it. And that's one of the fun things about here. Anytime we get these large donations, our teachers are all volunteers and they have great minds and they come up with some really cool things for us to make out of these big donations. Some of them I brought. So this bag is made out of upholstery material. The inside is a vinyl that was also donated. This vinyl's weatherproof. It used to be used to make ponchos. So all of these things have been made by our students in our class. We started making some clutches out of some of the donated materials. And while students are in class, part of the curriculum is they learn how to make a pot holder. I'm a baker on the side, so I was really excited about pot holders and I wanted a pocket. So now our pot holders have pockets and a little thumb hole for those of us that don't like a mitt. And then our most popular item that we sell are these microwave bowl cozies. Put your bowl in this, throw the whole thing in the microwave, don't burn your fingers on the way out. And these things have been great. Everything that's made by our students in our class, they get a tag on it that says who made it and where they're from. So anytime you purchase something from us, you're helping out somebody that has been looking for these skills and these opportunities. So that's a little bit about our program. I have some photos I'd like to share with you. This was from 2 sessions ago. So you can see some of the folks. We do work with the Afghani population. There's a lot of them in our classes, but many of those women don't like their photos taken. So also understand that there's probably about another 4 people that just are not represented in these photos. This person, her name is Cloudy, and she was actually our first transgender person that came to our building, which was great. She started referring some other folks to us. She had expressed to me several times how welcoming she felt there, that She had no problems, and she got to be herself. And it was really fun to see. And we provide all of the materials needed for class. So when somebody participates, all they got to do is show up. In this photo, the woman in the white shirt, that is Sister Mary Eileen, our founder of our organization. She's an Ursuline sister. As you can see, we have quite a few different machines. We are able to take 9 people per session. We have straight stitch, double needle, sergers, binders. And the fun thing too is I don't know how to sew. So I try to stay out of that room as much as possible. But because we wanted to start these evening classes and offer a sewing 101 class, I was the guinea pig to see how long it would take somebody without a clue to make these things. I do want to highlight this photo. You can see there's a dog in it. That's my dog. Her name is Minerva. And she, you can see on her collar, she's got envelopes. Those are the stipends checks. So she's our payroll department for our students. And even that is something really unique to our building because many refugees are terrified of dogs. Dogs in other countries are a whole different ballgame than how we treat our dogs here. So usually and she's a big dog. Aaron can attest to that. She's about 120 some pounds. So she's a Mastiff and very intimidating looking, but a total sweetheart. So the first week of class, some of our students are really afraid. But then as you can see, as time goes on, Minerva's our mascot. If I don't bring her to work, that's the first question. Where's the dog? Why is the dog not here? And the Afghani women, what's been fun with that is they started making this bread. It's kind of like a pita bread. I don't know, but Minerva's obsessed with it. And the women learned that she's obsessed with it. So then they'd start baking it and bringing it in for her. And I hear Minerva, and I turn around and there they are trying to feed her this bread and giving her this whole loaf. And I got to tell her no. So even gaps like that, that's what we're bridging. We're bringing people together. Now some of these folks aren't terrified of dogs. It's simple stuff like that warms my heart about our programming. So I just had to share. In an effort to get in more with the community and offer programs, we also partner with Fashion Talks. They put on a fashion show for the past 3 years, and we do an Esperanza collection. The first year, 2 years ago when we did it, I had 2 students that were very talented. One lady was from Jordan and the other one was a gentleman from Sudan. And they each got to create their own collection. They had 5 looks. And just giving them the opportunity for their designs to walk a runway, how often do you get that opportunity as a designer? So it was really fun. This past year, what we did, instead of just having 2 students, I opened it up to any of our students, and we had 5 that said that they wanted to try this out. So 5 students created 5 looks. Our collection was very different than all of the others because all of our collection too highlighted the students' personal style, and they're all very different. But it was also made out of all the fabric that we have downstairs. So our collection was 100% made out of recycled and donated materials. So that was really, really fun. The woman with the red hair, that was Diamond, and she was one of our student designers this year. So this is them getting their certificate at the end of class. Yeah. Thank you.
I wanted to take a moment. Do you have any questions for either of our people?
This is for Emily. Where do your sewers go after they finish their training program?
So the question was, where do some of our folks get jobs after completing our class? The biggest company that works with us is called National Safety Apparel. and they make safety apparel. So like the yellow construction vest, they do a lot of stuff with firemen's clothing as well. And they are actually the company that donated that large amount of blue sweatshirt material. They are also very generous. A couple of months ago, we took one of their old machines, they donated it to us, and it is a 12 or 14 needle forehead embroidery machine. So that was really exciting. We are in the process of learning how to use that. So if anybody's like super fluent in running one of these big machines, please stop by. But they're one of our large companies. I'm working with Aaron to get some students his direction. Cleveland Canvas Goods, like I said, was one of my first companies. And we still do. We work with Shelfont. They are a company that makes loading dock buffers for the trucks. And we took a bunch of their scrap too. And so we have all of this really cool black vinyl that we were using to make tote bags. Again, that stuff's weather resistant. It's made to be outside and beat up. So we've taken all of that too. We have a whole separate room of just that material.
Question? I'm for Aaron. How do you distribute? How do you sell? What's your marketing plan?
Sure.
So the question was, how do I distribute and sell, and what's my marketing plan? That has changed a lot over the years. When I started, I had a small showroom in Los Angeles, and most of my business was wholesaling to retailers around the country, boutiques around the country. After COVID, a lot of that business disappeared. And we're kind of building that part of our business back up. But we've spent more time in the last few years investing in pop-up markets, in our online traffic, and even as far as retail goes, in focusing more on retailers in our region to align with our values. So forget about California, we're looking at stores in Michigan, Pittsburgh, Ohio. So we have multiple tracks that we're trying to figure out right now.
I have a question from a virtual attendee. She's asking for Emily, where do you get the sewing machines that you're giving to the students, and are they used sewing machines?
So the sewing machines that we give to our 8-week training folks, those are all brand new sewing machines. And when we're looking for funding, that's the stipends, the sewing machines, and rent. Those are the main things that I look for funding for grant-wise. So I usually receive those funds through a grant. And we work with Pete at Globe Sewing Company, and he orders all of our machines. He comes out and services the machines that we teach on. And usually like the last week of class, we give them those home machines so they can start to understand it, and our teachers can help them out.
Very nice. Thank you.
So what are you two working on, or what are you talking about together between the two? About sustainability, or is it a secret? Sorry.
No secret.
Question 2, please.
Yeah, we were asked how we're talking about working together, and different ideas have kind of sprung up over the years. Right now, we're talking about working with some of the Afghani refugees that Emily mentioned to make tote bags from discarded fabric that we have, and just kind of running it through essentially the same process that Emily described, making bags that we can then take to pop-up markets locally so that we can talk about kind of the work of Esperanza Threads and kind of help elevate each other's projects that way. We're talking now about ways, when I realized Emily had some fabric and scrap waste concerns, we're thinking about new ways that we might use that material to stuff pillows or mattresses, or we're we're constantly talking and experimenting.
In regards to like the scrap, just this week, one of our teachers, like I said, they're very savvy on what we have around there. One of them started making a dog bed and stuffing it with a lot of our scraps. They just won't make one as big for Minerva though. It's a little heavy, but that's one of the ways we're starting to use all of our scrap material as well.
Are there ways in which you can articulate what the losses might have been to you, either professionally or personally, by the incredibly wonderful choices you are making as you pursue the career paths you've identified? What's been the downside? What's hurt by creating what seem like really extraordinarily wonderful paths?
So for us, like our main thing is people just don't know about us. So that's been the biggest push I've had since joining. Oh, and the question was what are some of the hardships that we have working with our organizations and doing what we do. So for me, it's truly just getting the word out there, finding new support systems, new donors, new funders, because it is a really great mission. Once people hear about us, they're more vested and more involved.
I'll answer this question very honestly.
Thank you.
For me personally, this has been a challenge in that I'm trained as an architect. I have no business background, not to mention no background in clothing making. I didn't go to Cat's fashion school. The learning curve has been enormous, much more than I anticipated. And from a professional standpoint, in terms of making the kinds of things that I make, I mentioned in my remarks before, I spend a lot of time trying to educate people about why what I do is different from what they might find for a fraction of the price online or at a mall. That's really hard to communicate to people because there's a lack of basic awareness, and frankly, the work that I do costs more to source and it costs more to make, and those are hard conversations from my position as a small business owner to try to have with my customers who maybe don't have that frame of mind to understand. I'm not trying to take advantage of anybody here, in terms of my customers. It requires a lot of very careful communicating and educating. And those are hats I didn't expect to be wearing when I decided I wanted to have a clothing brand.
I'll add to that because hearing him reminds me of a few other things. So my background is as a caseworker. I didn't go to school for nonprofit organization or anything like that. And I've just been involved with the organization and I have a great passion for it. So I'm the first full-time person we've ever had. So we've been around for 22 years and I'm the first full-time. I have Sister Mary Eileen is part-time as our head teacher, but everybody else are volunteers. So when I say, we're looking for support, you guys all just even referencing us and telling folks about us helps me out so much because as Aaron said, like just all the communication that we have to do in order to support ourselves, it's a great deal.
You obviously are doing production because you're selling to shops all over the country. But you're sourcing materials like in the initial photo you had a linen outfit or vintage outfit or something. You said you had gotten the material in New York. And the outfit that was dyed with photographers. How do you do your large scale production? And how big, I should ask, how big is your production for items? Do you just have limited lines or how do you work that?
Right, that's a really good question. She asked me to explain how we kind of manage our fabric supply with our production and how we are able to supply all of our wholesalers and customers. that would be another great answer to your question. It's extremely challenging to work this way because if I want to make even 50 of something and I have enough to make, I have, 6 yards of this and 8 yards of that and 10 yards of that. It's a logistical puzzle that I'm constantly trying to figure out. And maybe each fabric has a slightly different weight. We're recalibrating machinery. We're changing thread colors. There's a lot of work that goes in that is not reflected in our pricing just to try to make enough pieces to supply our customer base. We don't make a lot of anything. Usually I'm making, we might start a new style with as few as 25 pieces. We'll test it, we'll take it to markets, we'll see if people like it. Well, from there we might make 50. By the next year, maybe we're making 100. I'm never making more than about 150 of anything at one time. I might come back and, I might tweak a collar and make the same style again a year later or 2 years later, but we're working in very small batches each time. And I'm meeting with the buyers, retail buyers that I now have relationships with. I might even send them swatches or take them on a visit and say, I have, a few yards of this and a few of that and a few of that. Would you like any of these in your store? And they can kind of, they can request what they want. And then I'm able to produce kind of like a pre-order for their own needs.
Do you think that's ultimately sustainable for your business?
In order to keep growing my business?
Yeah, and just to keep having it, period, because it is so hard to do a small business.
Well, I know I can keep having it because it's every year it's getting a little easier in that I learn how to do exactly that better and more efficiently. I'm not worried about the business failing because of those choices. It is hard to grow it. And that's why, we've incorporated other streams, like, for instance, using organic cotton for our t-shirts. That isn't something that we're finding, 10 yards of in a market in New York. We are working with the farmers to have a steady supply of that. So over the course of a year of production, we might lean more heavily into one area than another in terms of our fabric and supply, depending on what's available.
I can attest to that. I believe Sarah has a pair of your pants, and every single time she wears them, I'm like, oh my gosh, I love those.
Literally wearing them right now.
Okay. I'm like, I love those pants. You can't get this. That's my thing is I feel like that aspect a little bit plays in your favor on the other side of the coin, because for me, if you were to replicate a pair for me or a few more, I would jump on that immediately because every time I see one, oh, there's only a few in the world that exist.
That's really nice. We can talk. But that is an important part of what I do. At this point, I only make a few styles. We have a t-shirt, a pair of pants, one button-down shirt. We make very few things, but we keep funneling the fabric that we do find through those same few styles. So, if Kat wants a pair of pants and we no longer have that fabric, as that style is fabricated in new fabrics over time, we're able to keep people interested in a very small collection. And some people are even coming back and buying, another pair of pants in a different fabric weight, for instance. But it's a very small collection. In that way, we've actually been able to, build a lot of trust and loyalty with this relatively small customer base we do have. And, the time that I give to managing my logistics supply puzzle is made easier by the fact that I'm only designing 4 or 5 styles. So it's just balance. Oh, hello.
One more.
Well, we could do one more question.
How many employees do you have?
Oh, I have 0 full-time employees. I work with a number of Kent State interns now who, at this point, honestly, do a lot of the design development. I work with one part-time employee who does a lot of the website development, backend stuff like that. And then I work with the sewers, the cutters and sewers who are not part of my staff. I pay them as an independent entity for the work that they do. I am hoping to have 1 to 2 full-time people by next year. But right now, the interns we work with are extremely supportive to being able to maintain what we're doing.
And the independent contract sewers coming into the
It ebbs and flows. I think right now there are 3 or 4.
So they both do have tables out there also. So if you want to see in the entryway, they just have a table if you want to see hands-on up close.
One thing, if any of you like Google us and you pull up our website, it's going to say it's under construction right now. We're in the process of building a new website and a new branding and all of that. So if you come back in about a couple weeks in the middle of August, I'll have a new website. But I do have a bunch of my cards, and anybody can email me if they're interested in volunteering or more information. My email is just Emily@esperanzathreads.com.